All right, the Tennessee Titans squad show is here. We talk about Cam Ward's star power, and the first padded practice for the Titans is today. What we need to look out for in the position groups to keep an eye on as the Titans squad show starts now.
Tighten up. It's the Titans squad. Sponsored by Gametime. Everything Tennessee Titans every week. Covering all the big hits and game-changing plays from the heart of Music City. The way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. Squad up. The Titans Squad Show starts now.
And welcome to the Titans Squad Show. I'm your host, Julian Minnesone, alongside two-time Pro Bowler, Mr. Brad Hopkins. B-Hop, I saw you over at Nissan Stadium for the open practice on Saturday. First chance that fans got to see the Titans kind of in action. How did you enjoy it out there?
It was actually really good. It was fun, not only just being back in Nissan Stadium, but approaching the stadium and watching the fans with their different jerseys on, almost as if it were a game. You know, them eagerly anticipating to see what the 2025 class of the Tennessee Titans looks like in shorts. Basically it was fun. It just kind of reminded you that football is back and that people are excited about what could possibly happen this year. So it was great.
Whenever you go to a stadium like that as a former player, do you ever have a trip down memory lane when you see some of the other alumni there and you kind of get the feeling you walking through that tunnel?
Yeah, it's a little bit different because we're not up in the stands, when we're getting ready, going into the locker room and you're waving to all the security staff and the people that are lining the fence just to maybe get an autograph or to say hello, being up in the stands in the suite. It was great, for them to actually host us. And I really appreciate that, the fact that they wanted to connect with us old heads. But it does. It gives you a chance to go back and tell those stories that you always tell every time you get together and, reminiscing. And I think that what's unique about that is that that's what most people miss about the game that can't play anymore is the camaraderie. It's, the friendships, the relationships that you build when you spend so much time together and doing such a hard thing, trying to accomplish like winning football games. So it's always fun to get back and kind of recall those days of when we were down on the field doing exactly what we were watching on Saturday.
And the Titans looking to build some camaraderie this offseason. We wanted to remind you that today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. So I wanted to talk about Cam Ward. You got to see him a little bit up close and personal there. He made some amazing throws. Sure. They did a lot of third and long situations. They did a lot of red zone stuff as well. What did you make of his performance on Saturday for the first time in front of a public audience there with fans?
I like this command of the offense, Jules. It seemed like it wasn't his first time running it. Even though he did get flushed out of the pocket a couple of times, you got to see him navigate the pocket under those type situations. It's not like they had the pads on like they will today to where we'll really get a true indication of what this team looks like from a physicality standpoint. We'll talk about that later. But just his ability to concentrate, to focus, to deliver an accurate ball, sometimes while on the move, and, taking those chances, to kind of make those plays consistent. You got to have the confidence to let that thing go. To even be able to even pretend like you can do it. So, the fact that he, had like thread the needle. You're probably going to hear people say that a lot because that's what he did, throwing into triple coverage sometimes, finding a guy. Now that could have resulted in a pick, very easily could be having a totally different story, but the receivers came up for him, right? We saw him roll into his left and throw across body, hitting the Calvin Ridley for a score. Those are cool things that you expect to see them do more of during the regular season because that play broke down. They had to improv and somehow they found each other. And that's exactly what you would want to have develop in training camp. So they're already on that track to being able to, consistently understand exactly the little nuances in this offense. And I like where Cam Ward is to this point.
Yeah, that was really the first time, at least in the first week of training camp, that they were working, down the field. But Cam does his best work, like you said, improvising, playing backyard football a little bit. That throw across his body to Ridley, Now, it was likely a sack. If you ask Jeff Simmons, it was probably a sack. If you ask Cam Ward, it was probably a touchdown. You know what I mean? But there was just some exciting plays that, if you're a Tennessee Titans fan and you were either watching on social media or you were there at the stadium, it's okay to get excited about that, even if it's the first week of training camp. 3-14 last year, you don't become 3-14 without playing a really kind of bland brand of football. You know what I mean? There is some sort of excitement there that you want from your quarterback. A lot of the guys talked about Cam, the way he carries himself. There's, the kids call that their aura, that it factor. And he certainly got that. I mean, fans after practice were screaming this dude's name like he was part of the Beatles.
Yeah, he kissing babies and signing autographs, and
they were handing him his children. Their children.
He embraced his role.
Yeah.
He not only is a rookie quarterback, he's the first player taken in this draft, and it doesn't seem like that. It doesn't seem like that because there are very few people nationally. There are very few people outside of the scope of Tennessee that watch this team that are really talking about his development and the role he's undertaking. You know what I mean? And I don't know, maybe that's just this sleepy Nashville market, comparatively speaking to some of the other incumbents. But for the most part, man, we should be talking a little bit more about this kid and how he's actually poised to maybe even have an electric year. I think as we watch him do some of the things that we're watching him create, you can't help but have this quiet enthusiasm that, if you care about that stuff, golly, this dude right here, he's developed a little bit beyond what we expect. And that's a nice thing to deal with, especially when we had so many issues at quarterback over the past few years.
I think the best soundbite of the day came from Jeffrey Simmons. I talked with him after practice, and he was talking. I asked him about, their first day of camp together. They were trash talking each other. And that's bold for a rookie quarterback to do with the best player on your team and the leader of your team. But Jeff embraced it. I think it won over the veterans. And this is what Jeff Simmons had to say, how that ratcheted up in camp and how that helps the Titans moving forward as they try to build a cohesive team this offseason.
I consider myself as, the captain and the leader on the defense. And, the way I go, I feel like everybody else go. And I'm big on the team is led from the trenches. No matter the offensive line, defense line, the way we go, the team go. And I try to bring the energy. I try to bring the juice, no matter if it's smack talking to Callahan or Cam Ward. They on the offensive side of the ball. So I just try to bring that energy. And just vice versa. You got the head of the snake, and that's our quarterback. No matter what team it is, they're the head of the snake. They get the offense going. So when you got a quarterback, but he's a young quarterback that's doing that, you can't help but to rally behind him. You can tell by the response from the offensive line and everybody else around him. He pushing them guys and he making them even talk a little smack more. So I think that's what we want. That's what we need from out of Cam. He's gonna have to play football for us, and me and Cam may be talking smack, but guarantee you, I'm gonna be the first one to have his back on Sunday. So.
Man, the whole team just kind of seems re-energized. Jeff Simmons seems re-energized. Calvin Ridley, especially the bond that he and Cam have already developed. Cam saying that, Ridley's one of the best receivers in the league, if not the best receiver in the league. The connection that Ridley and Cam have had, the connection that Simmons and Cam have had over this offseason, it's kind of just boosted everybody on this team the way Cam has already galvanized the troops here.
Yeah, you just want your guy to be confident. I think the difference between someone with experience and someone that's a rookie is that they don't necessarily feel comfortable to take that leadership role and to be, in their own skin as early as Cam has been to this point. And I think that's one of the things that's quietly exciting for Jeffrey Simmons is that this guy doesn't care what his position is as far as I just got here. I'm probably the newest student in the building. This is his job, his responsibility to lead this offense, and he's confidently doing that. And that's one of the reasons why I think you see the respect factor be up front and center. Now, I will say it's like a family. Those are brothers, and they fight each other. They wrestle each other. They get into it. They love each other. But at the end of the day, you're not going to come into that house and pick on my brother. That's my brother. And that's the way when you talk about offense and defense, how they have to relate to one another. And Jeffrey was 1,000% right, Jules. This game is won in the trenches. It's a physical game. There's violence to it. And if you can't manage those type of situations, the reality is you're not going to have a good team. So the leadership should come from in the trenches. It should come from the big bodies, the ones that are setting the tempo, by how they play and approach the game. And that starts in practice. So,
and we'll talk about that coming up later in the show when we talk about the pads and what that means, especially for the offensive line and defensive line. One last thing on Cam's point of view. Last year it seemed, and maybe I'm the untrained eye looking at this, B-Hop, but like last year it seemed that Callahan was trying to fit the play calling, force the play calling on the team that he has, rather than maybe tailor it to the skill set or personnel. What is your philosophy, I guess on that when it comes to an offensive scheme and play calling, when it comes to building it maybe around a Cam Ward and his skill set, as opposed to maybe trying to make your offense fit around the team you already have?
That's a good question. I mean, you're only as good as the players that you have running your plays, period. I mean, I can drop all kinds of things that are designed to bump your head on the goalpost, but at the end of the day, it's about the Jimmies and Joes running those X's and O's. And I didn't mean to sound cliches, but that's how it came out. Point being, you have to look at your offensive line. You have to look at your running backs. You have to look at your receivers, and you have to see how those connections are being made. Does this team have the strength of running the football? Does this team have, more of a balanced feel to it, where you can run play action? Are they just a strictly vertical team where, we've got a guy that has ample enough time in the pocket and a big arm quarterback that can extend the field like that? I mean, what are my realities? And of course, the situations are the biggest thing. If you're in a situation where you're, third and long, you're going to be in passing down situations more predominantly. If you're in a situation where, third and short or third and manageable, or where you're living, the playbook is way more expansive that way. So I don't know that it was, Callie saying, well, our identity is going to be passing the football. Our identity is going to be, the passing game and doing those kind of things. I think he was just dealing with the circumstances that come up during, your time on the football field, and trying to find the best play that can take advantage of a defense, and they study film too. You know what I mean? They see the situations, they see what you predominantly go to in those situations, and they're trying to take them away from you. So then you have to have something to counter that. You know what I mean? So it's a lot of chess going on out the football field. I don't think that you can be as narrow-minded to say this is what we're going to do. I think the situations dictate more of what that reality is.
And Brian Callahan talked about that before practice on Saturday. Here's what he had to say.
I think that's always what we're trying to do, is build an offense that plays to his strengths. He's pretty adept at throwing the ball down the field. That's something he did really well in college, and he's not afraid of being aggressive with the football, which is a good thing. And then you add some of the players we've added, and some of the traits that they have with our young players, and some of the veteran receivers we've added that have the ability to stretch the field too. That we got some, there's no secret, we have a lot more speed now at receiver than we've had, and that's exciting.
Certainly exciting. And I will say, maybe Titans fans might get PTSD from last year. The sequence that sticks out in my mind is when they played Detroit and they threw the ball 4 straight times on the goal line, when you have your best player, Tony Pollard, right there. And it seems like at least the red zone stuff needed a little bit of work on Saturday, but it seems like they're more inclined to work around what Cam likes to do best.
Let's look at that 4-play series for a second.
Yeah.
It's not like they went up there and they said, hey guys, we're going to throw the ball in the end zone 4 times. Get ready. No, I mean, I think that what he knew, what would that circumstance dictate? Running the football, the power game. You're close. Lean on those big bodies to open up holes in Tony Pollard to wiggle into the end zone. That's what they think you're going to do. So what if you do something different? You know what I mean? It's like, hey, what if I showed you this running formation and I did play action, or I did actually, roll out and have a pass in mind? I think that they were just trying to be less predictable, and it resulted in 4 pass attempts with nothing to show for it. And of course, you're gonna wish you had that back. But at the end of the day, I think that they knew what conventional wisdom would say in that situation. And they were just trying to catch Detroit with their pants down a little bit. You know what I mean? They're gearing up for the run because that's what they think they're going to do, because that's what the situation calls for. And then you do something different. Had it worked, it'd have been geniuses, right? But it didn't. So now we're second guessing them. It's easier said than done.
Yeah, easier said than done, that's for sure. Okay, on the other side of the break, I know some people had some comments here about Traylon Burks, that situation, the Titans deciding to cut ties with Mr. Burks. We'll talk about that and what that means for the rest of the receiver group coming up when the Titans Squad Show returns. Keep it locked here. All right, everybody. We've all been there, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Well, live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Gametime comes in. Gametime makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals, especially in Music City. If you live in Nashville and you're listening to this show, tired of endless scrolling, trying to find the best deal? Well, Gametime's Zone Deals pick the best seats in your section for you. Now, take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets and show tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. All right, B-Hop, we're back. Of course, the big news of training camp, I guess the biggest piece of news was Traylon Burks fractured his collarbone, and the Titans yesterday decided to waive Traylon Burks, signing Ramel Keaton from the Raiders as a replacement. Do you feel like it was just kind of time? You know, I know they talk about the best of ability is availability, and you feel bad for the guy because he's kind of had a rough go of it with the injury front. Never really got going. You know, you hear about the potential. You saw it at Arkansas, the athleticism, and that play in particular, the diving grab, it was incomplete in the sideline, but it's kind of a microcosm of his career, right? You know, the great catch, the athletic ability, but then just can't stay on the field.
No, it's actually what makes it even sadder is the fact that it was an attempt. It was his try to make something happen. You know what I mean? And it resulted in him fracturing his collarbone and ultimately losing his position on the team. And it sucks for him. I feel for him, you know? I think that Cam Ward spoke on it unknowingly when he was talking about, you know, Traylon and his talents and size, and, you know, he's looking forward to working with him. And he said, what? If he's healthy.
Yeah.
He didn't even mean to say it like that. But you know what? It was in the back of his mind.
Sure.
As it was with everybody else, you know, that are thinking about him winning a position on this roster. And ultimately, that's what it comes down to. Now, I think that, you know, obviously this is a next man up mentality. You've got younger players like Alec and Shamir Dyke and some of the other free agents that they brought in that aren't going to be positioned to be starters, like Van Jefferson and Tyler Lockett, of course. But just it allows more opportunities for those kids to get more reps. Bryce Oliver, you know, Xavier Restrepo, you know, that who already has a nice little rapport with his college quarterback, and that might make a difference for an undrafted guy to make a roster, right? But they're going to get more chances. And that's just kind of the way you got to look at it. Right now, Traylon has to get himself healthy. He has to get himself in the position where he can actually help a team. And because of the injury waiver designation, you know, because of the fracture, he will be able to be picked up by somebody once he gets himself ready to go. You know, and who's to say that this won't have a fairy tale ending where he starts making plays someplace else because he's now got layered experience on him and has gone through all of the crap. You know what I'm saying? To ultimately find his way. And sometimes it does take longer than we expect. And we end up, you know, rinsing babies out with the bathwater, unfortunately. But that's where we are with Cam. It's just the reality. Yeah.
And you bring up a good point about the young rookie receivers. It gets them at least a more of an opportunity to develop too. I mean, it's no question why the Titans drafted, you know, 2 rookie receivers back to back. They need help in that department. Right. I'm excited to see what DK could do. I'm excited to see what Iomanner can do, and Xavier Restrepo as well. Maybe on the back end of trying to make that team. I didn't think Burks was going to make the team anyway. I was on that side where he might have been on the outside looking in, and maybe this just makes it a little bit easier of a decision. The big thing, at least for those rookie receivers, and you mentioned it as we're getting into padded practice, is how they deal with the physicality of padded practice too. They haven't had to deal with that much in press coverage and all of that stuff. So Brian Callahan actually talked about that before practice and what he's looking for out of those young guys. Here we go.
The biggest thing for me for young receivers is when you put pads on and you start to play against press coverage. That's the difference for what these guys see more of now in the NFL is colleges play a lot of softer coverages, off coverages, just in general. And so now you're going to deal with guys up in your face at the line of scrimmage. How do you release? What's your play strength versus guys when they're on your body? That's going to be a big point of emphasis and a big area of revelation to see how they handle those things early on.
And what is the biggest difference, at least in your eyes, B-Hop, when you're going to start dealing with more physicality? We'll talk about the trenches here in a little bit, but at least from a skill set position.
100%. I mean, the release is the biggest thing for a receiver, right? When you're in 7-on-7, when you're playing a loose coverage, you don't have to worry about someone jamming you at the line of scrimmage because you're just going to get off and you're going to run your route and hopefully you can get yourself open. But when you have cover 2, when you have cover 0, when you have dudes that are standing right there at the line of scrimmage and they can put hands on you once that ball is snapped for the first 5 yards, that's different because now you have to make that a part of your release. You have to plan on him jamming. You have to plan on him trying to guide you and disrupt your route. So you already have to have something different in mind of what you're going to do. Okay, he's up in my face. I need to run this sluggo. So I need to get up the field for 5, for 10 and then cut inside or whatever I'm about to do. And I need to set that up. I need to get his hands off of me. I mean, and the thing about it is if I can slow down your timing because I'm keeping you on the line of scrimmage as long as possible, you're not even going to be an option for the play anymore. You've disrupted the whole timing of the play just because I got a guy that's in my face. And so you have to plan for that. It's completely different when a quarterback looks out there and he sees cover 4 and he sees 4 dudes in the secondary and 2 of them aren't on the line of scrimmage and the 2 safeties obviously are deep too because they're planning on you throwing the ball. That guy knows what he's going to do. He's got the underneath stuff. He's probably got a quicker route he can run, maybe even get into a vertical situation where he's running go routes because he doesn't have the pressure that he's dealing with. But when you got a guy that's standing right there that is basically trying to be in your shadow and knock off your timing, that is a completely different play. Completely different.
And the hope, I guess, for these younger receivers who are kind of seeing all of this, at least at the NFL level for the first time, is, we talked about Cam in the 5 a.m. film sessions with the guys, with the rest of the rookie receivers, and the rookies in general, and how much maybe that's going to expedite that process as much as possible. The more reps, the more chemistry helps not only the receiving group, but Cam as well. I'm actually looking for Xavier Restrepo because Cam and him have been through the ringer. You mentioned, the rapport that they have with each other. I'm looking for him to be a guy that shines at least early on in this padded portion of practice because he may be small, but the dude is a physical runner. He's a little fire hydrant out there, Yeah. And the fact that he has that camaraderie with Cam already, they know how each other tick, especially when things get physical.
Yeah, he's got a little chip on his shoulder, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And you like that because it does show an attitude. You know what I'm saying? It does show, hey, I'm not gonna be out here messed with. You know what I mean? So if you get into my face, if you're trying to get physical with me, I don't mind that because I'm gonna get physical right back. You know what I mean? So, but obviously you have to stay within the constraints of the play, make sure you're available. Because it's not gonna get in a fist fight like Deion Sanders and Andre Rison. Remember that fight back in the day?
Oh yeah.
Trading blows back and forth. Well, guess what? Andre didn't get the ball then. So
Callahan talked about that. He actually already spoke this morning. He said, yeah, there's no, we're going to try not to do that and not to fight each other as things, get hot and heated out there.
Yeah. But you know what? But you don't mind them competing.
Sure.
You know what I mean? There's a difference between, you and I sitting out here and we just going back and forth and I just completely forgot we're out here playing football. You know what I mean? Versus, hey, it's a part of it. I'm going to use that to my advantage. That's why guys like DK Metcalf, big receivers, they pose a challenge not only for the high point in the football, but just they put hands on you and get you out of the way. You know what I mean? So that's why tight ends I think are so unique because a tight end is the biggest receiver that's on the football field, and they're bigger than most linebackers. In instance, they're just not as big as linemen, but they do have that advantage to where when they're running routes, man, or they have the football in their hands, very few people want to get in front of them with that size and speed combination. So if you have a tight end that you can line up on the line of scrimmage and then extend them to not only the slot, but the X position out the widest point, that's a dude, man. You know what I mean? That's a guy, because he's bigger and thicker than your most receivers, and the challenges are going to be as such.
Let me ask you this. We talked about Ridley a little bit in the first part of the show, and Cam, he and Cam have developed such a bond already. I mean, we saw it on Saturday with their connection. Given that Ridley is the best receiver on the team, how much would you say that Cam leans on him in this early part of padded practice?
Well, it's not like the defense doesn't know that he's his favorite target. I say because it's the best option that he has. You know, defenses will do their best job to take him away from the equation. They'll bracket him. They'll, obviously they'll press him. They'll do all kinds of things to disrupt the timing of it all and make him find somebody else. So what Cam has to do is understand exactly that and go through his progression quickly and find the open receiver, because that ultimately will work in Calvin's favor. Because when he shows that he can evenly distribute the football from what they're trying to game plan and take away from him as options, he'll find Calvin soon enough. Because then you can't just leave somebody open that's been kicking your butt. You know what I'm saying? It's like, dang, man, this tight end or the guy coming out into the flat, he's really been murdering us because we're doing this, too high safety look, or we're trying to, make sure that we don't get beat deep. Well, guess what? They're getting chunk plays, 8, 9, 10 yards every single time because the underneath stuff is open. Throw some play action in there where you run draws and, just really kind of run between the tackles sometimes. Just you got to do those things that then ultimately will open up your best option. Because right now they're going to be saying, hey, look, stop number 0. We stop number 0. We got a chance to get this offense off the field, and we got a chance to win this ball game. If you let them exploit us, if you let them connect and do all the stuff, it's going to be a long day for us, fellas.
Yeah. And I already said, I mean, Calvin just kind of seems re-energized and like totally fresh. I mean, he talked about at his kids camp earlier this summer, hey, this is probably the most competitive camp I've been a part of. And I'm looking forward to going to war with Cam and going to war against the defense once things get going and get more physical. And the funny thing is, how I know Ridley is kind of, I guess, woken up a little bit more than going into this camp is I saw him at the Green Hills Mall shopping at Nordstrom for a new outfit the night before camp starts. So he wanted that first day of school. I'm excited to get back to see all my classmates getting ready to go. So
hold on a second. What was you doing at Nordstrom, Jules?
Man, TV, we have to wear suits.
That's kicks, huh?
I had to get it tailored, man. I had to get my Titans blue suit ready to go for the season as well. Don't call me out like that, B-Hop.
I just caught that. And Green Hills too. Boy, you ain't spare no expense. I see you, big dog.
Hey, man, you got to travel for what you like. You know what I mean? So had to hit the Green Hills traffic one time over there. All right. Well, on the other side of the break, we're going to talk about the other side of the ball, the defense, particularly that inside linebacker spot. Who is going to line up alongside Mr. Cody Barton? We have a couple options. We're going to break it down next, right here as the Locked On Titans Squad Show returns. All right. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. Fantasy football is back. Fire up the group chat and get your draft board ready and buckle up for a season filled with breakouts, busts, and all the overreactions we live for. It's all going down on Yahoo Fantasy. This year, me and a couple of friends from work at my channel, News 2, Channel 2 here in Nashville, WKRN, are playing in a Yahoo Fantasy League, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. I've used Yahoo Fantasy for years and love how smooth the draft day experience is. You always need to have that, at least when you are picking your players. And to celebrate 28 years of fantasy greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days, giving you more ways to play, more ways to draft, and more ways to win. It all begins August 4th. Stay tuned and get started by creating or joining a Yahoo Fantasy Football League at yahoofantasy.com/lockedonnfl. That's yahoofantasy.com/lockedonnfl. And let's make this fantasy season the best one yet. All right, B-Hop, wanted to talk about the inside linebacker spot. Cody Barton's been an animal already, and multiple interceptions off Cam Ward this camp. He's certainly showed himself as an anchor of this defense and one of the leaders on this team and an experienced guy. But the big question is who lines up next to him, at least for a majority of the snaps. You have three options there at inside linebacker: James Williams, Cedric Gray, and Otis Reese. Is there anybody, at least from what you've seen, that stands out among that group and their skill set yet?
Yeah, they're all, I say, so young in that,
Yeah.
James Williams, 13 games, Otis Reese, 13 games, Cedric Gray, 7 games. There's not a lot of experience going on there. And even when they do get on the field, 17 tackles for Otis Reese, 22 tackles for Cedric Gray, 26 tackles in total for James Williams Sr. So, they're going to have to understand exactly what Denard wants from them to be a complement to that defense. It's not like Cody Barton, who, basically has seen 7 years of experience through 3 different teams and, amassed a little bit of a rapport. Now, I will say he's only a sack and a half, 3.5 sacks total for his entire career, but that's not how they're using him. It's not like they're, rushing the passer with him in the middle. He has been that guy in a 3-4 defense that sits right there in the middle and make sure that, tight ends don't get nice releases and areas to throw to. The sliding to come running across the middle of the field and be, unabated. So, I think that he's, a guy that understands exactly the lay of the land, where these other three need more reps. They just need more repetition. Now, I will say, James Williams was Cam's teammate, at Miami. So, they have some understanding of each other. You know what I mean? I'm sure they probably would advocate for each other. Otis Reese, SEC guy, sure, college free agent, but he's seen some pretty competitive offenses, some high-powered offenses that you would hope get him ready. And he's been here, for a couple of times. So he's understanding a little bit of the nuances in the culture that Cali is trying to create. So, I think that today's practice, when you put the pads on, moving forward, the joint practices that they're going to have against the team, oh man, those are going to be huge for determining which one of these guys separates himself. Because, linebacker, like I said, you can't hide there. Football is about what? Blocking and tackling. And if you can't get a guy on the ground on defense, then you're a liability for that defense. So we'll see which one of those guys rallies around, flies around the football, has the best instincts, and is in the correct position, right? Not out of position, to be able to make plays.
Yeah, with Otis and Cedric, they've dealt with injuries, kind of off and on injuries over the last year. So getting healthy and being young players, you want the reps, obviously. James Williams, though, he did have an interception on Saturday in camp. And we talked about, they know where kind of the play calls and where it's going to be, but you still got to come up and make the play. That's for sure. But he is a converted safety, and the big thing with him is he's a violent player, it seems. But when you're making that switch, the tackling consistency and angles are a big thing. Can you kind of speak to that portion, especially when making a switch and from safety to an inside linebacker that Williams is making on that front with the fundamental portion of the game?
Right. Well, strong safety, though, let's make the distinction, because strong safeties are run support. Strong safeties do come down into the box and make tackles. They are that extra dude when they're not in passing situations. So he's used to being physical. He's used to showing up. He's used to putting his face in there and dealing with the physicality that comes with, tackling runners and doing all those things. So it's not like a free safety. Free safety is basically supporting the secondary. He's making sure the corners don't get beat. He's the last man in defense. He'll be floating around there in that cover 3 or whatever, to where he's just trying to make sure that everything stays in front of him. But that safety, he is a smallish linebacker. And it's not like he's small, period. 230 pounds compared to Otis. Otis is like 217 pounds.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So Cedric Gray, 234. So those are some bigger body guys. I mean, but think about it, 6'4", 230 as a linebacker. That sounds pretty legit. You know what I mean? Compared to, Otis, who's 6'2", 214. Now, if you just said Otis was playing more of the safety type stuff, I'd be like, okay, he's got to be more of a free safety by how he's built. But I would expect, guys like that to be a little soily, to be a little more callous when it comes to being able to jump into the middle of the fight and be physical. That's what I expect from him, even as a former safety, being strong safety.
And James Williams, I chatted with him afterwards. He just mentioned time and reps is really the most important thing for him and a lot of the younger guys moving forward. Here's what he had to say about that really quickly.
I mean, it was mainly time. Time kind of put me in the position I'm in now to slowly recognize and understand where I'm at, where I want to go, and understand what Coach Frank want me to do, Denard and Coach Kelly, and execute the things they put in front of me and get the job done.
And there you go. You mentioned, what Denard is looking for from those guys. Mentioned the time, the reps, and just getting more comfortable in that spot. And that's going to happen over time. It's not going to just happen this first week of camp. So yeah, when the pads come on, that's certainly going to change a lot of things, especially for the linebackers.
You know what helps them? I started thinking about it. Two of my former teammates, Frank Bush, Stevie Jackson. Stevie played the game from the safety spot with a level of physicality like that. He's going to stick his nose in there, so he understands that brand of football. Frank Bush was a pro linebacker until a back injury basically sidelined him, for the rest of his career. But he understands exactly what it's like. Hell, he ran Buddy Ryan's defense when Buddy was here as an Oiler. So I think that the knowledge that these guys are going to get in competition coming from two former Oilers is going to be paramount. Because they play the game at the level of which Denard Wilson expects them to play, and they played it at that level. So it shouldn't be hard for them to coach it at that level, Jules.
Yeah, it's funny whenever Denard speaks to the media, you kind of there's such a calming demeanor there with him that he just knows what he's doing, and you kind of saw early flashes last year, but I don't want to put the cart before the horse here, but you see Denard Wilson, and when he talks to us, it's kind of, he's got that head coach quality almost in him where he's not rattled up there. And I think his players, getting them on that same page is going to be huge, especially when you talked about the joint practices, how they're going to line up against somebody else on the other side that's not their teammates for weeks on end, and kind of itching to hit somebody else that isn't their teammates. So we'll see how that goes. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say real quick, just on Denard Wilson.
Yeah, no, of course.
You have to have that as a defensive coach.
Yeah,
that is your identity. If you don't have a good defense, if you don't have a dangerous defense, if your defense isn't scary, people aren't threatened about your team. They're just not. You'd like to think the physicality of offensive line play really matters. It does. At the end of the day, we pass the ball sometimes. So we're in passive situations. Defenses are always attacking. They're always attacking. And if you don't have a leader that preaches that or that knows exactly what that looks like and how it should be ran, you got a problem. And that's not one of Denard's.
Right. Great point. No. And make sure you guys keep the comments coming. We might even get to them at some point in the show. At the end of the show, this last segment we're going to talk about the padded practice. And as the Titans open up padded practice today, what we're looking for, we're going to talk about the trenches, which I know B-Hop is excited about, and all of that fun stuff as Tennessee Titans training camp week 2 begins. Keep it here on the Titan Squad Show. All right, B-Hop, padded practice number 1 to start week 2 here of training camp. Let me ask you this from a former player's perspective. What do you learn about your team in a padded practice that you don't learn when it's not padded?
Their tolerance. It's almost maniacal to think that I enjoy running into each other consistently. I just love getting my bell rung, as we used to say back in the day. I love smacking dudes around. If you like that, then you probably have some kind of mental issue. You know what I'm saying? We tolerate those aspects of the game. We learn how to develop those calluses that make it easier to do that. When you start lifting weights and heavy weights, you start getting these little nubs right here on your fingers. You know what I mean? Why? Because of the pressure that's created by the bar or the weight that you're throwing around. And it builds up those things that make it less painful for you when you're dealing with that. That's what padded practices do. They build up those calluses that allow you to go out there and stop thinking about how physical the game is. Now, from one team to the next, the level of preparation from a physicality standpoint, it varies. Some people pick those teams that don't practice very hard. You know what I'm saying? It's intentional. But some teams have identified what wins, and that winning formula means that during the week, we've got to be nasty. We've got to be soily because the week is won, or the game is won during the week. So when you go out on Sunday and you've already been playing at a level of physicality that these hard, tough-nosed teams already have established, you have a better chance to win, because at the end of the day, that's what it's about. It's about submitting that dude on the other side of the football to your will. And how do you do that? By making him feel it. And that's the difference about football. You do get to smack and tackle and hit and block and do all those other things because they are a part of the game. They're part of the nuances. And so when you start practicing those things, which is what the guys are going to do today, now you start really starting to see what reveals itself. This guy might look like an amazing football player because he runs fast, he cuts hard, he does all these things. But boy, when you put a dude in front of him with a helmet and he can hit him, woo, he's a little leery. You know what I mean? He gets a little gun shy versus that dude that, man, not only does he have all those intangibles, this dude will run through a brick wall, literally. You know what I mean? It doesn't concern him. He's not scared. He plays the game with reckless abandon. Eddie George used to call it, Jules. He used to call it controlled rage. He'd get us up in the middle of the huddle before a game. And he goes, gentlemen, we got to go out there with a controlled rage. And we all knew what he meant. You know what I mean? Because you just can't walk around with rage. You're going to get arrested. You know what I mean? But if you can control it and flip that switch when the time calls, man, the best ones can do that whenever they need to.
And from a coaching perspective, it's going to give Callahan and his staff a better idea of those position battles, like we mentioned, the inside linebacker spot, or the battle in the trenches up front. We had it earlier in the show how Callahan talked about even just the rookie receivers as well, how they're going to handle contact from a young guy's perspective, getting hit in the mouth for the first time. One guy, and I'm interested to see how he handles it, is Elikayo Manor. A lot of people are excited about what he can do because, he put up the game against Travis Hunter, the record-breaking performance, and mossed him in the end zone and all that stuff. But a lot of people may not know he used to play hockey. He's from Canada. He's from Medicine Hat. And those dudes, if you're talking about physicality, those hockey guys, they worship missing teeth like they're battle scars, So I'm excited to see what somebody like him would do. When you're talking about physicality, B-Hop, is it really like dogs getting ready to chase a mailman out there?
That's a great analogy. Now, I will say it's really weird because you see defensive players, you think defensive, right?
Yeah.
And offensive players, you think offensive. Well, it's quite the opposite. Because when you're doing a pass rush, what are linemen doing? Retreating. You know what I'm saying? And the defensive linemen are the ones that are attacking. They're on the offensive. You know what I mean? So it's really weird. So that's why we love running the football. If you that allows me to be physical as a player because I get to fire off the line of scrimmage versus backpedaling. You know what I mean? And so when you're using that analogy like dogs and mailmen, if I know that I'm about to run this thing between the tackles, and if I'm double teaming with my guard or my center or whatever, and I'm going to send this guy that's a defensive player for a ride, I'm salivating. You know what I'm saying? Just like when a defense deals with a passing down and they see the quarterback in a shotgun formation and they know that it's going to be a pass because they've got four receivers, you know what I mean? Maybe an empty backfield, and they get to, what do? Pin their ears back. How many times have we heard that, right?
Sure,
Pin their ears back like a dog getting ready to chase a lineman, right? So they're creating those situations, man, where they're trying to be disruptive. They're trying to get linemen in space to move their feet and somehow exploit them to get a hit on the quarterback. And think about that. The play ends when what for a defensive lineman? The chase ends for a dog when he gets his teeth sunk into that mailman's booty, right?
Yeah, right.
Well, it's the same thing when that defensive player gets his hands on that quarterback and drags him to the ground or knocks the crap out of him. That's what their mission is. That's what their goal is, to be disruptive and get the mailman's mail.
And you talk about the defensive side. From the offensive line perspective now, too, a lot of the guys talked about on Saturday that now this is kind of where the real fun begins. I know on Saturday they worked a lot of silent count stuff, being in the stadium, pumping in the crowd noise, really kind of game-like atmosphere is what they wanted to simulate. But they said it's obviously harder when the pads aren't on and you can't be kind of full go. From an offensive line perspective, is this kind of the time where you see what they're really made of?
100%. I mean, think about it. You're passing off stunts. You're taking on the pass rush. That's the hardest part, is doing that without pads on. You know what I'm saying? Because pads are your leverage. It's not for grabbing necessarily. It's just having a flat surface, something to push back against. You know, it's hard pushing against a bare shoulder because that shoulder moves. You know what I'm saying? It's flexible. Versus a shoulder pad. Shoot, if I can punch that shoulder pad, it automatically sends a jolt through a guy. You know what I'm saying? He can do those things. And you can guide people, steering them a little bit without getting called for holding. But also, getting your face into it, using that as part of it. I'm not saying your head, I say your face, because that's part of your leverage. You know what I mean? There are 3 points of contact. You got to be able to see what you hit so that way you don't cause an injury. But you're delivering a shot. You're delivering a blow. And that's what linemen are geared to do, both offensive and defensive linemen, linebackers too, running backs too, because, they're blocking in essence a lot. If they're not, taking a handoff or running out into the flat to catch the ball, guess what they're doing? They're supporting the pass protection. They're making sure that lineman doesn't get beat on the end of the line of scrimmage. They're making sure that linebacker that's sneaking down into the, A and B gap that's right on the either side of the center isn't posing a problem to where he's going to get to the quarterback immediately and then step around and deliver a shot. You know what I mean? So this is where the rubber meets the road, Jules. This is what football is about. And I'm sure that those linemen, they relish the opportunity to show exactly what, one-on-ones can look like when we get into. That's the best thing. And if you want to really, truly figure out a team, go to two different situations. You go to the one-on-one pass pro drills with offensive and defensive linemen, because that's them by themselves, matched up singularly, individually, and blocking. You can definitely see what a guy is worth right there. And everybody's watching you. You're the only two that are going. And then 9-on-7, because 9-on-7 is a predominant run drill where you're firing off the line of scrimmage, and either you like getting hit or you don't like getting hit, or you just tolerate getting hit. But either way, those are the two most physical elements of a practice that really tell you a lot about your team.
One guy I'm going to be looking out for is J.C. Latham, coming into kind of a year two. You're hoping that there's some ascension there. He's down in weight. He shaved off his head. His hair. He got a haircut, kind of like when you get broken up with and you have to kind of new year, new me kind of feel. It seems like he's expecting big things. And I think last year for him in particular as a rookie, he had so much success at Alabama. That is the program where you kind of have success and you are prepared for the NFL. And then when he gets in, there's a little bit of a wake-up call kind of in that midpoint to the end of the season for him, where he said, I needed to change something. What are you expecting from J.C. Latham at a year two, going back to the right tackle position where he had so much success at Alabama, another year comfortable, down in weight, all those factors playing into it?
Well, and he's got more experience.
Sure.
The reps are the biggest thing, Jules. You know what I'm saying? He's gotten a chance to go out there and hone his skills. Now that he's moved back to maybe a more familiar spot, he'll have better results. But I also think that he's inevitably going to have better results because he's seen more action, right? He's seen himself in those positions, and he's now learning how to react in those situations. There's not a lot of newness, or not as much newness. Let's put it that way. It's not like he's played every defense in the league, over and over again to understand the patterns. But he has more understanding of what's going on and what's required of him in those situations. Now, you can't have your coach going to the media and say, not going to the media, I'm sure they were he was asked about it, and mention your weight. For linemen, that's basically saying that you're not in condition. That's what they're saying. Because if you could run around consistently and make things happen at 400 pounds, who would say anything? But usually, at 400 pounds, you're carrying a lot of mass on you, man. And at the end of the day, you're going to get tired. When you get tired, you start making mental errors, or you start, breaking down your technique and that kind of stuff because you're fatigued. What do they say? Fatigue makes cowards of us all. And that's a fact. So when someone says you're overweight, that means that you're basically not in shape. And that's the way that they're saying that JC ended the season last year. Maybe he got a little complacent. Maybe he wasn't spending as much time in the weight room or doing things after practice that kept him in shape, because it was coming towards the end of the season. You know what I mean? You pretty much figure you got everything in the bag. Well, you still got to keep at it. You got to finish, which is what they always say. So he's not going to have that be a part of his conversation this year. He understands as a pro, you got to come in shape, you got to come in ready to go, got to be strong, got to be physical. And as best he can prepare his mind, body, and soul to do that, it seems like he has a better understanding heading into 2025.
Right. And I think Saturday also a good chance to get in front of the fans, kind of do the game day routine, get dressed in the locker room, run out of the tunnel, kind of work with the guys. JC Latham is excited more than anybody to get the pads on finally. And here's what he had to say.
In my opinion, practices are harder than the game, so you don't really want to try to kill yourself in the pre-practice warm-up because it's a little bit different than the game. But yeah, I mean, just to get that feel and that, routine established, so check marks on what you got to do to improve on that routine and everything that goes into a day like today.
And you mentioned right there the routine and the discipline part of it going into year 2, how much more experienced he is about the process rather than just, what I have to do in the game itself.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what I'm saying. He understands more of the nuances of being a lineman in the NFL and what you can actually control. Now, as far as him cutting his hair, I cut my hair. I went bald too when I first came in. It was more for an intimidating factor. You know what I mean? Like, if I'm looking at you as a bald head, I'm like, man, eyeballing you, looking like a Rampage Jackson. You know what I'm saying? Just looking all cute and cuddly with your, looking like a bear, you know what I mean? With his dreads, and good looking kid, you know what I mean? So you don't anybody like, oh, look how cute he is. No, you're like, man, I want to mess with that guy in the dark alley. You know what I mean? That's what you kind of want to give that presence, man. So, got to look a little more soily. Can't look all cute and everything. So you got to strike fear in these men.
We're going to get to some comments here real quickly from some of our viewers. It could be on anything that we talked about in the show. They left a couple here for us. Here is one of the ones they talked about from Derek Williams. This is referring to Treylon Burks, as we talked about earlier. The Titans should have used him more like Deebo Samuel. In college, Treylon spent majority of his time in the slot. Did the Titans misuse Treylon, or was he on the field enough to even use him?
Deebo got a lot of slot. He got a lot of stuff in the flat. You know what I'm saying? He was one of those. He almost was played more like a tight end than anything else. Quick release, get the ball, because he was the yak dude, yards after catch. You know what I'm saying? So get the ball in his hands, you're not gonna be able to tackle him easy. And it's not like you run a lot of fly stuff, a lot of go stuff, a lot of those routes that get vertical, because he wasn't built that way. Treylon. Every single quarterback that has come in here, they just recognize his physical potential. You know what I'm saying? Because he is a size mismatch, because he does have a good balance of speed and strength. It's just being in the right position, staying healthy, and being consistent that were the things that plagued him most. But when Will came in, of course, he talked about him. When who's the boy in Green Bay now? Malik
Willis. Yeah.
Yes, he liked his game. Even Ryan liked his game. Mason Rudolph liked his game. Everybody likes his game, and they spoke about it. Matter of fact, I think Calvin Ridley, one of those cats, came in here and said that Treylon was the baddest boy in the receiving room. Mm-hmm. If he realized that, you know what I mean? But you got to go through those things to develop that confidence. And he just had such an up and down journey here. It's just like, it was hard for him to just kind of tap into the fact that it's almost like he had imposter syndrome, right? Like, do I belong out here? I'm amongst some of the best receivers in the game, and I'm trying to carve out a niche for myself. And it's just harder than I thought. So I just think dealing with all those other things just didn't allow him to realize what a lot of other people already saw in him, Jules.
Yeah, the physical ability was there. I mean, we talked about, I mean, that catch that he basically ended his Titans career this past weekend was a kind of big picture. That's what he could do. I mean, it was a diving grab near the sideline, albeit incomplete, but that is a screenshot of the ability or the potential that he had. And you saw it at Arkansas too. I mean, the guy put up mad numbers at Arkansas. I mean, you don't become one of the best receivers in the SEC by being some chump. You know what I'm saying? So
Like that.
it's kind of unfortunate. You got to feel bad for the guy because he has all the ability in the world. It just never, as one of the viewers said, and we talked about it here, best ability is availability.
Yeah, you know what hurt him was effort. Isn't that something?
Yeah.
You know, he's putting in the effort to make a play and, you know, lays himself out there trying to stretch out. Next thing you know, comes up with a fractured collarbone. And you hate that for him. It wasn't like he was, you know, dogging it on a play and somebody popped him because he wasn't running hard or, you know, he did something silly in a soft tissue injury that, you know, whatever. It was him being physical, him giving up his body. And it ultimately ended up, you know, costing him his jersey number here.
One last comment we're going to get to. Someone says, if the Titans don't have a winning season, will BC, Brian Callahan, be out? I don't think so. Yeah. I mean, I don't think they're even looking for a winning season, at least right now. I just think as long as you see kind of progressive growth, you know, if you win 6 games, you're not going to have a winning season, but you doubled your win total from last year. And I think with Cam at quarterback now and a lot more pieces in place, especially on the offensive line, you're going to kind of see what Brian Callahan could do. It was hard to tell what he could do as a head coach with the kind of the roster build from last season as well. And I think that's what you're kind of going to kind of see heading into 2025.
Brian Callahan is quite different than Mike Vrabel. By culture, by coaching, even sides of the football. So when you're trying to reestablish a culture, it takes time. This isn't Tang. I know you don't know what Tang is, do you?
Is the drink Tang?
Yeah.
Of course I know what Tang.
Right? A couple scoops, pour it in some water, stir it up, you drink it.
Yeah.
It's not like growing those damn oranges on a tree. You know, go out there picking them, squeezing them into a glass, and you know that's a process. You know, and especially if you want it to stick. So that's what he's been working on. One thing that does give him, in my opinion, you know, a stay of execution of sorts is that he's working with a young quarterback. You know, and if you expect Cam Ward to come in here and maybe, you know, have that Jaden Daniel type expectation. Well, we want one of those guys. You know what I mean? That's all Jaden did was put the pressure on young guys to say that it can be done. Look at what this guy did. He got into the playoffs in his rookie year. You know, look at Jalen Hurts. This guy has been to the Super Bowl twice already. He's only been in the league for 6 years or whatever it is. So younger players do have the ability to have instant success, but that's not the average. So I think in looking to develop his young quarterback, you know, help him understand exactly how he is best suited, not only with his strengths, but as a coordinator and an offensive mind, how we can make you better. Yeah, I think that Amy understands more than anybody else. Hey, look, this is a work in progress. We're going to have our lumps. Hopefully we'll have some, you know, what do Aaron Rodgers say? Aaron Rodgers threw a pick, his first pass in practice, right? Yep. And he said, yeah, you know what? I'm going to try some stuff. I'm going to throw some picks. It's okay. I'm going to throw some touchdowns too. And, you know, when he said that, you're thinking, oh, you know, so as long as Cam has that kind of confidence to know, hey, look, you know, some things might go my way. Some things might not. Got to have short-term memory. You know what I'm saying? Put it in the rear view, even on your successes, and keep this thing rolling.
Keep it rolling. B-Hop with all the tang and all the tea here on Locked On Titans show. All right, we'll be back with you guys Friday. Somebody in the comments asked, where is Big Ty at? He's taking care of some stuff at the home front, so he'll be back on Friday here on the show as well. Remember, every Tuesday and Friday, at least that's the tentative schedule right now here for the Titan Squad show. You can get it wherever you get your podcast, on audio and on YouTube as well for a video component. But for now, I'm Julian Minensone. That's B-Hop. We'll see you guys next time.